All right, we're good to go.
Okay, welcome to the Land Down Under Hangout. This month we did two New Zealand authors. We did Maurice G and Margaret Mahy. We did two novellas. I'll let Elizabeth determine what the differences are between the different eras of novels. We did the Halfmen of O, which is the first in the Motherstone series, and we did the Changeover, which I think is a standalone by Margaret Mahy. They're both written in the 70s and the 80s, and for me they're a bit of a nostalgia trip because I'm a New Zealander, and the Halfmen of O was something that was read to us when I was in primary school, and I grew up with Margaret Mahy right from day dot. She writes for a wide range of ages, so I was keen to delve back in and see if they stood the test of time or not. So yeah, let's get into it. Should I start somewhere else, or should I start with me? Let's start with me. Firstly, I'd like to apologize to the group for those who read the Halfmen of O. It did not stand the test of time. I have all kinds of problems with this book. But I will get into that. But thank you to Mel who suggested doing the Changeover. I actually really enjoyed it. It's definitely of its time, but very well written and a good read. So yeah, look forward to getting into it. Let's throw over to Mel, who actually did recommend one of these books, and see what her thoughts were. Oh, sorry, she's eating. Let's go to Elizabeth, who can determine what kind of novellettes, I don't know what the names are.
Yep, they're actually both considered novels, because a novel is anything over 160 pages, which both of these are.
I read on a Kindle. I have no idea.
I think the shortest is the Halfmen of O, and that's what, 192. I think, yes, 192 pages, at least the Kobo version. So still scrapes in novel territory. I found the Halfmen of O a bit of a slog, and I actually found that the Changeover made a really interesting contrast with it. In fact, because I think it does well some of the things that Halfmen of O does poorly. But it was good to read both of them. I was a bit of a fan of Margaret May's work when I was younger, so it was nice to go back and have a look at some of her stuff, and I'd not read the Changeover before, so it was good to have a look at that. So yeah.
Great. Mel, you look like you've finished eating.
Yeah, I've deliberately not taken another bite. Yeah, so I didn't finish the Halfmen of O. I got stuck at around about 11%, and I've been having problems reading lately anyway, and there was a particular event that I'm sure we will talk about that at the 11% mark just made me, I don't know, I couldn't stop. I kept flicking away from it and couldn't finish it, and just gave up eventually. But I read the Changeover last year, I think, I think it was last year, either last year or early this year, for another book group, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much I really quite liked it. I think Sarah's comment about it being of its time is appropriate, but I think it's very good for of its time. So that's something that's worthwhile talking about, and I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Cool. Kim?
Well, my books only came on Wednesday, so I got through the Changeover in less than 24 hours.
Well done, you.
But I didn't make much headway on the trilogy of O.
You chose wisely.
Yes, well, I when I read the description for both of them, I actually wanted to read this one more because of the description. So as soon as you said, "Oh, this one's better," I'm like, "Yep, done." Because I'd only read about 10-20 pages of this one, so can't really comment on this. Seems like a younger level book than this one, the Changeover. But I really did enjoy the Changeover, and I think that was witnessed by the fact that I read all but like 10 pages in one evening.
I would consider the Halfmen of O to be middle grade, whereas the Changeover would be young adult.
Yeah.
Definitely. Matt?
We only had the one book to read, and that was the Halfmen of O, which I finished about
That was my fault.
15, 16 minutes ago.
Nice work.
I finished the changeover at 7:45, so there you go.
There you go. It was actually a very quick and easy read, but I guess that's partially due to the fact that it's a kid's book. My biggest feeling of it is it was a lot darker than I was expecting, given that it was a child's book. And I was like, oh, I obviously haven't read a lot of kids' books for a long time, because that was like a different feel than I was expecting. Yeah, it was, I don't know. I didn't love it. I didn't dislike it. It was kind of in the middle for me. Sorry, no, I was just going to say it. The biggest sense I got was kind of like it was. It almost just felt like a little derivative of fantasy stuff in general. Like, yeah.
Just a touch.
There's a lot of archetypal stuff going on and journeys and what have you, and so yeah. Now Kristen can go, I guess.
So I'm an idiot because obviously I made a bad choice, because I was like, well, I'll try to read 2, but if I only get one done, well,
that's my fault. You asked which one, and I said, well, the one that I was most drawn to was I wanted to read this from my childhood. So you asked, so you're not the idiot, I'm the idiot.
Yeah, because the reason I didn't get to the changeover, which it sounds like a lot of people liked, was because the Halfmen of O was such a friggin' slog. And I'd said to Matt, look, I'm not buying the other one in case, like, I didn't want to buy both, and not if I wasn't going to get to both. I thought I'll buy the second one when I'm done with the first one. Well, I'm still at like 70-something% on the Halfmen of O, because every time I opened it up, I started falling asleep, or I was like, my other book is so much better, and I just closed it and went back to listening, because I'm listening to the Lightbringer books on my Audible, and I was just like, yeah, no, I can't keep going. This is so freaking boring. And I think that was my biggest issue with it. It was just it was nothing in particular that I disliked about it. It's just I didn't care, and it every time I went to read it, I'm like, ugh, there's more interesting things for me to be reading, and I got sick of it, or I fell asleep. So I didn't finish it. And I did really try. I even went, I had a bath last night, and I said to Matt, I'm going to leave my phone where I can't get it and just lie in the bath with my drink and my Kindle and read, because then I won't be tempted to look at something else. But even then, I still it was quite fast when I was actually reading, but oh God, yeah, no. And so I didn't get to the changeover, which sounds like was a bit of a bad choice. But anyway, oh well. I'm not worried about spoilers.
There's not lots to spoil. They get away. Huzzah!
This is the first part of a trilogy, right? So
yeah, and actually when I read the synopsis for the second two parts, it's basically what it reads like was, this was successful, let's write a sequel, as opposed to, I have a game plan and I need a bigger novel series to, which is always like, I've made money, let me create more based in this world, is never works, whether it's movies or books or not. If you have a game plan from the beginning, or like, this world's kind of cool, it's done well, I'll explore it in other ways, a la Becky Chambers, that's a different story, if you know what I mean. So I've been reflecting a bit on, and I'm curious to know what others think about why this appealed to children of the 80s, e.g. my school classes, versus why I found this so hard now. I know why I didn't like it now. The characters were not 3D characters. They were not well developed. I did not care about them. I didn't think the relationship made any sense. They hated each other at the beginning, or he didn't understand it. And I'm like, the book couldn't decide. It was plot driven, but it was trying to do some character work, but it just couldn't commit. And that was a lot of my problem with it. The world building was just not, it was there, but just wasn't, I guess the English language wasn't used to its extreme of, in the same way when I read the Margaret Mahy book, I'm like, that's it, there it is. There's someone who understands how to build what someone's seeing and experiencing, and the sights and the smells, and that world felt very real to me of what her life in a subdivision was like. You know, there were so many characters they encountered, and I just, you know, the only character who's in any way, shape or form I felt built out was Jimmy, the evil guy, you know, which is like a bit sad. I think that was the other thing from the character point of view. I didn't understand motivation. Susan had no motivation. What was her motivation to do this? There was nothing there. I was like, other than she's like, I want to be good. Really, what was at the heart of everything was just missing. So, and to Matt's point, it was very derivative of. I felt like Maurice G had read and loved Lord of the Rings and wanted to do something in that style, but just didn't quite realize why Lord of the Rings was so good, because it was both character driven and amazing world building, which, you know, it seems easy until you try and do it.
Especially funny. Sorry, Kirsten?
I just said I was thinking the same thing.
I was going to say it's especially funny too because, of course, in later decades, Peter Jackson makes The Lord of the Rings in New Zealand. So it's kind of like what the author was trying to do in this book.
To take the ring, I mean, the halves to the fires.
Exactly.
I
did think as I was reading it, like, oh gosh, this is straight out of Lord of the Rings. And then I was like, oh, am I being too harsh? Because really, you could say that about a lot of fantasy, that like, because Lord of the Rings was the seminal work that so much stemmed from, but it just felt like instead of being inspired by this, like he just kind of went, oh, we're going to have this event and it's going to be similar. Like, I'm like, oh, this is the Shire and this is this spot. Oh, okay, now they're in Rivendell now. And like when they went to the place where the birds were, I was like, oh, this is Rivendell, right, okay. And then they were sent on their quest from there, and I was like, okay. But I'll tell you the thing that I think was the biggest problem with it was the language did not mesh with the subject matter and the story. So I would say that the plot and the dark themes and what was going on with it was more like your upper primary kind of level. But the actual text was like beginning reader level. Like the actual words in it were very, very simple, very, very simple sentences, very, very simple words.
Yeah.
I felt like I was read like the kind of books that you give to kids.
Yeah.
The kind of books
it was like they
when
did
they
this,
first
and then
start
they did
chapter
this,
books.
and then they did this. It was very like A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
It was really hard. It was like
the kind of books that we're reading to Xander right now. He's got these like My Little Pony books that are very basic chapter books, right? That's what that reads like to me. But then the things that are happening, you wouldn't give to a kid that age. So it's like, it'd be a good one. Actually, I would probably recommend it to kids that are lower level readers, but in higher level, like, because a lot of the time you have kids that are struggling readers and they don't want to read the stuff that's at their level because it's too boring and too babyish. I think it might be a good choice for those kind of kids, but I think that was the thing that I had trouble with. It was like the language was just too basic. I don't know if that's just
I thought I heard Xander. I thought I heard him.
Oh, hello, Xander.
Hey, Xander.
You're muted.
Yeah, I think he muted him because he was talking.
I heard singing and I was like, that's not my kid. No, she's
I heard that
too. Who else was, what was the event you got up to, Mel, because I, like, it was also dull. What was the 10% event you got up to? You're like, I've given up.
That was when what's the name of the dude? Sorry, I'm flicking back to the Jimmy Jaspers kidnapped her, basically. Well, not kidnapped. I don't know if you call it kidnapping when you basically drug them and send her on her way.
Yeah, it was like a zombie, like it was a drug that made her kind of do what they wanted to do, kind of like. Yeah.
And I just felt, I don't know why, but it made me feel extremely uncomfortable. I felt like it was. I think particularly because she was a girl, a female, it felt very much the drug rapey kind of. And I just felt so uncomfortable, and then also what's his face? I can't even remember their names.
Nick and Susan.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Nick and Susan. So Nick was just sort of watching it all, waiting for his moment. But I'm like, dude, your moment was ages ago. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
quite sure of the ages of the kids either.
But regardless, I just felt icky and I didn't like it. And I was reading on my phone, which is always a mistake. So I just kept flicking out of it and watching YouTube videos. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, that was me. I'd be like, I'm gonna read it, and then I'd read like a little bit and then get distracted because it just wasn't. I wasn't interested.
Yeah, I wanted to play. I played House of Da Vinci 2, and then I got back into replaying the first one because there's a plot that I couldn't remember from playing it 3 years ago. And then I'm also replaying through Uncharted 2. So these are all things I'd rather do than read this book.
Me with listening to my other book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting though, like, but I think I was about 7 or 8 when this was being read to us. And I think it's also maybe because we're older and wiser and we know that there are, and it's interesting the same, you know, it was interesting the Margaret Mahy book because she didn't shy away from any of this kind of like that guys are bad and that women have to
but she didn't display all guys as bad either. Like it was that
no, but someone was raped in her book, right?
Yes.
And that like when her heroine is walking or protagonist is walking, she's very aware. And then there's a whole time like it's been called out of like I can't remember the seductiveness of or the secrets of being a female and stuff like that, which I'm kind of like being aware of your own body and being like, I'm like, well, why is this always put onto us? It's a story of now the new century, but anyway. But like as a kid though, you know, I'm not aware of how bad the world can be, or how bad men can be. So I don't remember feeling it awkward. But now, you know, in my 40s and going, oh look, it's date rape in action, you know, and also just how nasty that character was to Nick even at the beginning. And I'm like, his redemption arc still, you know, like, and it was amazing how they didn't want to kill him, and I'm like,
it was really weird because the story kept iterating that Jimmy didn't have a drop of evil in him. I'm like, what exactly are you defining evil as? Because I mean, he did some really terrible things.
The cops are looking for him.
The only reason he went over to their side was because he was pissed that he got screwed out of his money. It wasn't because he was realizing that like kidnapping a child for money is bad. It was just like, oh, I kidnapped the child and they didn't pay me, so now I'm switching sides. Like that doesn't make you good.
No.
Very
far from it.
I still can't. I couldn't. There were some really cool races that they met, and they were just so. There were too many of them to really develop any, like, there was no character development. I'm like, why are we meeting 5 of these people when we could meet one, like a few in the periphery, but really get to know one, and that becomes someone we really care about? Because by the time they showed up at the end where they were being called in the ring, I'm like, they could have been the bird people versus the wilder folk or whatever they were called. I got very confused.
Yeah, the only ones I remember are the bird people. That I probably didn't get to all of them because I stopped early.
You didn't meet the stone people.
Yeah.
No, I didn't meet the marsh people. I got as far as I think they met the woodland people, whatever they were.
Yeah.
They
had
Sarah,
some
had
you and some seals? They met some seals.
Okay.
I remember the seals.
I didn't get that far.
No, that's right.
Had you read very much other fantasy before you read this as a kid?
That's what I was thinking too.
Because I'm wondering whether it's just discovering fantasy was the nostalgia of it and going, wow, I really enjoy this genre, and this was your entry into the genre.
Yeah, the only thing before this would have been Star Wars, and that had a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
You know, I wrote fan fiction about Obi-Wan Kenobi. That was how big that influence was. So having this, sorry?
He didn't die. That's the fanfic.
Well, he said he'd come back more powerful than ever before, which he didn't. But you know, if you strike me down, I will come back. And I was like, oh, he's coming back. You know. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. It definitely it was really cool and meeting different races, but it might have also been to what you said, Kirsten, that maybe I was 6 or 7. I don't think I was 8 or 9, but it felt like I was being read to, you know, a lot of classes. So I went to a school of like 100 kids, so often there were more classes, and when things were read aloud, there was quite a big range of ages. So I remember none of the particulars of this except that whole transition into the other world and, you know, finding a mine shaft. And it was kind of like Lion Witch in the Wardrobe moment. And that like stuck with me. So, and that seems very real as far as like in New Zealand, you find old mine shafts and you could find these moments, these secret places, because, you know, it wasn't all developed and it was very easy to find yourself in. Like I grew up in Wellington where we have set aside reserves called, oh God, my Elizabeth, what's it called? Because you're my brain tonight. I'm joking.
I have no idea.
Anyway, the green belt. It's called the green belt. So you know you can get a wilderness, you know, areas like within 5 minutes of most places because it's everywhere within the city. Is this area called the green belt, which is green belts connecting suburbs. So this whole thing of secret places and gateways to other worlds seemed very like exciting and. Because I remember, I never read Lion Witch in the Wardrobe, but I watched a cartoon version of the first one, and that really stuck with me as well. I could access another world.
I think I watched that too.
Yeah, and the Secret Garden was the same. So this is kind of, I think, impacted me in the same way about any children can get to somewhere else. And the birthmark stuck with me. But as far as like what happened on that was why I was like, I don't remember anything else. And it turns out it's because there wasn't anything worth remembering.
And the birthmark.
Yeah, it could have just been. Sorry, you go.
It was the yin yang symbol, right?
Yeah.
Which was the whole story.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, wasn't like that reminded me of.
Seriously, I actually picked up on that from the tiniest little bit of description at the beginning, thinking it sounds like a yin yang.
It's like it fits together.
But I just assumed that I was wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, I did kind of go, and I do remember, like, I was thinking, like, is this not cool to be like, oh, this is my fantasy world, and I'm going to pick a symbol from the real world and then act like nobody knows what it is or has ever heard of it before, like.
What were you going to say?
In their version of the world, like maybe there is no yin yang symbol at all. But I was like, could you not have?
Well, no, they came from. I'm pretty sure they came from, you know, our world initially.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think that was meant to be.
It could be a version of our world where there's no yin. I don't know. I was just like, would have been much better if they'd come up with their own symbol.
Balance, like in Taoism, it was used as an idea of balance. So the idea of halfmen were that. It had been ripped in two, and so the two pieces were kind of scattered to secret places. But so to bring them back together was to keep the parts in balance. I don't know enough about Taoism to know if that's accurate or like what that goes into. But you know,
it's more like it's more the idea that they've picked a religious symbol from another religion and then just shoved it into their fantasy and then gone, this is what it is. And
so did the Nazis though. That's the thing. Swastika is old as time.
Yeah. That's true.
Also, if you're looking for a fantasy series that has appropriated the yin yang symbol, hello, Wheel of Time.
Oh, I haven't read that. I have been meaning to get to that though, but I haven't as yet because there's so many books, and I'm like, that's a big investment.
Yes, it is, and it could have used some cutting down, but I will not go on my Wheel of Time rant.
Just a little.
I tell you the other thing. Okay, so the end. I can't remember who got there. I got there. Elizabeth got there. Anyway, okay, 3 of us got there. So the end was kind of the most exciting bit, right? I enjoyed that, and it felt like okay, you know, with the crawling up and yeah, that was kind of exciting. But there was the bits that annoyed me. Actually, I remember what it is that he had this bad habit of like referring to the future. The characters say. So, for instance, Susan told Nick later that she felt like this. I'm like, what are you doing? Don't take it out of the present. I felt like I was giving this author who's well written and renowned, like instruction from beyond the future going, why are you dragging me out of the present of what's exciting so I know that it's going to be safe? Like Susan told Nick later that she felt like this. So where are the stakes? Does anyone else remember this and got annoyed by this? Because I got he did this several times and it pissed me off.
It bypassed me actually, but I can see why you might want to diffuse that tension if you're writing for younger readers, because if they do get really concerned about the fate of the characters, then it can be hard for them. Whereas this way is a way of saying you know, it's going to be okay, but things are still tense at the moment. But it's not.
I think. Sorry, keep going.
I was just
going to
say
that it was about time I got excited.
Yeah, the side effect of it is that it does undermine the tension.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think though that Harry Potter, the popularity of Harry Potter shows that you don't have to do that for kids to enjoy a book. Like kids actually enjoy the tension, like just like we do.
Yeah.
But I feel like that this is possibly a book of its time in that respects, though, right? Like it was written at a time when we were a little bit more protective of kids in terms of not.
Yeah.
But I think some of the other things that happen in it were bad, though. That like I wouldn't like. I don't know.
I didn't read it all, so my impression is obviously.
Yeah.
I think though. I think about
point,
movies
Kirsten.
at that time. Like I think about Gremlins. I think about even the Neverending Story. Goonies.
Yeah.
You know, the stakes were freaking high in those. Those Goonies probably not so much, but Gremlins was pretty, like, it got really bad, right? It got your midpoint, went down, and like, oh, you know,
that was pretty
the
scary.
bad guys, cool bad guys population, yeah. So it never felt like you had to undermine it. I think the Princess Bride did a nice job of it because he would get concerned. Like, I don't know if anyone else loves The Princess Bride as much as I do, but I love that movie. And that was almost like to what you said though, Elizabeth, like he would like it suddenly, you know, would turn to the grandfather and he'd be
she
like,
doesn't get eaten by the eels at this time.
She doesn't get eaten by the eels. Like, what? And actually that's the bit, like Fred Savage going, hang on, you just dragged me out of what's a really nice, great, exciting moment to, you know, because you look concerned. It's just it's almost a commentary on don't do it, right? Because it's almost like very tongue-in-cheek, like reference to itself. So it was a couple of moments it did that where I was like, oh God, stay in the present, like don't go wandering back and forth of referring to this part,
especially since like there's been no like future set up, like they're not telling the story from the or anything like that.
It's not a flashback, it's not anything.
The other thing it could be is like dealing with, because he's using a close third person perspective, he wants to jump between the characters and he's not doing a very good job of it.
And I think that is, I don't know if that's Elizabeth, maybe you can speak to this, with this whole writing from different characters' perspective. I know Game of Thrones, like that's often what comes into my head, and it's not that that's the first novel I ever read that did it, but it does it very well because there's so many of them, right? This is almost a book that could have done very well in that kind of like writing from Susan's perspective, writing from this, you know, back and forth, because there was like, if it was better written, because I think about what was going on with her, that journey that Nick took when he arrived in O, that would have been interesting. I would have liked to have known how he met the world, you know, the woodland people. Like that could have been like the jumping back between the two perspectives. You don't necessarily have to write a chapter as chapter Nick, chapter Susan, but like I don't know when that kind of writing, or if that's always been something that's happened in literature, because I do enjoy that from different perspectives in novels.
Well,
when it's done well, it's really good.
He's writing from two different perspectives, because we get some of Susan and we get some of Nick. It's just never the interesting bits. I think it kind of speaks to another problem with the book, is that it's unclear about who the main character is. Is it Nick or is it Susan? Because we start out with Nick.
But even at that stage, it feels like it should be Susan that the perspective should be from, because she seems to have the interesting life.
Exactly, but we can't have a girl be the main character.
Heaven forbid.
So I think that, like, I would have guessed that was what the reason for having Nick at all was. Especially because in the beginning, Susan is a nothing. Like, she's an enigma. Like, she's just, you don't get any idea of what she's like at all, except that Nick thinks she's stuck up. And then when you get her in O, she's completely different. Like, she is a totally different person.
Yeah.
Mm.
But
But it's
also
all
whatever conflict was set up, this is my other annoyance with character development and then not being 3D characters, is that whatever conflict he was setting up in those first things back on Earth, that just weren't there in O. And I'm like, there was so much opportunity to explore this push and pull of her maybe still being, like you said, still being maybe a little bit flighty or a little bit of an enigma, and him not quite getting her. And that just didn't seem to kind of pass. It was like suddenly he was like, I know I have to go after her. And then like there could have been a bigger story arc to that, if that makes sense.
It felt to me like
kind of, you go. You started.
It felt to me like every time we were in his head, he was just complaining that he wasn't getting the attention. Like, oh well, I feel like, you know, I'm not doing anything interesting, and like it just felt like he was complaining every time we were in his head, which was when I got annoyed with his, you know, when they switched to his character, I was like, oh God, what's your problem, man?
But
Clearly, then he wasn't the center of attention. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Just like it didn't seem to serve any purpose. The setting up of that conflict at the start at all.
Yeah.
It came to nothing. It was, you could take that out of the story completely.
You could totally.
Nothing
Why
changes.
could they just shown up? She was a bit weird, you know, but he was looking like, why couldn't he have been looking forward to seeing his weird cousin Susan? Like, there was nothing wrong with that. Why was there a conflict? Because it was just, there was no point to it once they got to O. Like, yeah.
Like, my other thought would be, like, aside from it being like not that he didn't want to make a girl the main character, I would say the other thing it feels like, it feels a bit like a leftover influence from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Like, he was trying to set up Edmund and Lucy but didn't quite manage it.
Yeah,
that's interesting, because my take on it was that he needed to get Susan to O without Nick interfering. So this is my problem, where it was like, this was a plot, he was plot driving things, but he had characters and he didn't, like, so he tried to use character development to drive the plot and it didn't work. So, but that's also a really interesting take, which, yeah.
I feel like there is nothing that he does in the plot that couldn't have been done by someone else.
Yeah. I know, and that's what I was just about to say about the different perspectives.
Okay.
Like, the reason that you have more than one point of view in a book is probably two things. It's either you're trying to develop the character more. So Game of Thrones is a great example, because when, I think it's in the second or the third book, you get a perspective from Jaime's perspective, and it changes your view of his character completely because you're in his head instead of viewing him from other people. And it was one of the things I really enjoyed about that book so much, was because it subverted what I was expecting. I was like hating this guy, and then when I was in his head, I was like starting to see things from his point of view and going, oh my God, how did you make me start agreeing with him? And it was really good writing that they did that. So there's the character development reason, which obviously wasn't the reason because it didn't help develop the characters. The other reason is to take the reader into another place, or to see something that your other character can't see or be at. Yeah. Which he didn't seem to do either.
No, so that's what I mean. He missed that opportunity. Like, Nick coming through the pool, his experience, that would have been cool, but he didn't do anything.
And it would have made it worth being seeing it from Nick's point of view, because you'd be seeing stuff that Susan can't see and can't be with. So, like, even
just from a like, you know, more interesting, like, you know, at the end part, there's the bit where Susan's getting into the city and she's on basically hiding on a boat that the seal people are pushing up the river. And apart from like a couple of halfmen looking in and going, oh, should we, you know, steal some shit out of this boat? And they're like, nah, whatever. That's the extent of the tension there. Like, she doesn't get discovered because they can't be bothered coming on this old wreck of a boat to steal something. Nick has like crashed his glider somewhere. He's managed to infiltrate the halfmen city and hide amongst them, waiting for her to arrive. Like, that's a much more interesting part of what
he's
happened in
gotten
that
intel
story.
to find out what happens. Like he's been overhearing conversations. He's working. Like there's a whole lot of shit going on there that would drive the plot forward more than sitting on a boat having some seals push it in up a river. You know.
I think
You guys are
another
not
thing
making me want to finish it. I could tell.
No, it's not worth doing, honestly.
I didn't like how she just kind of became a zombie on a mission at one point.
Yeah.
Like basically she's just like, what else?
This is what I talk about. Like this was a plot-driven thing that happened to have characters in it. It was like, and like what
for a
Kirsten
given
said
value
about
of characters.
What was that?
I said, well, for a given value of characters.
Sorry. It just felt like it was like this and also it just felt like it was an instructional thing. So Susan did this, and then we do that, and then we go here, and then we noticed this was this, and then it was like that. And to your point, Kirsten, it just even the plots are like, if we're going from A to from B to C to D, at least make it interesting, not just
the
like
other
instructional
thing,
video.
Yeah, it was very like join the dots kind of thing.
It was.
There were villains who were pathetically underdeveloped and not interesting at all.
Yeah.
Actually, I had a point about that too, because Otis Claw, right, the big bad villain, they totally go for the fat and disabled. Yep, like good work, guys. Really nuanced.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, yeah, nice way to body shame people, you know. Yeah. Yeah, and the cats. I thought it was unfair to the cats. I'm like, it's not their fault. And the thing that they had it in for the cats, I'm like, geez, give them a break. Yeah, I felt sorry for the cats. Yeah.
Should we perhaps move to the changeover?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. I think we've talked enough about this book. So yeah, not good. I don't even think it's a children's book. It's good, and I, as I said, I think the only maybe like you see, I think Matt or Kirsten, maybe one of you were saying, was it because this was an introduction fantasy that I'd had a little taste of here and there, and I think that's true. But the fact that I can't remember much about it, what's interesting is I've read his other book Under the Mountain, and I remember that to be really exciting and really good, and it rates better on Goodreads. Now, whether it's better in a whole lot of other ways, I don't know, but it's much more quintessentially New Zealand. It's set in Auckland, and I don't know, but I now don't want to read it because I had such a bad time with this one. You know,
well, something
maybe you just can't go home.
Something I found quite interesting was that when people saw my updates on Goodreads and cross-posting to Twitter, like I got a bit of interest, like people going, oh, that's interesting that you're reading that and that sort of thing, mostly from like New Zealanders. So the author seems to have like a great deal of like fun, like people have a great deal of fondness for the author. So I don't know whether it's rose-colored glasses sort of nostalgia stuff or whether people have revisited it since then, but clearly he's still beloved.
Yeah, and as I said, I don't know when he wrote this. That's the other thing I couldn't.
1982.
But I meant more in like when in his
career.
works. You know, like was this early works, and then by the time he got to some like Under the Mountain, that was maybe a few. He's had some time to hone his craft, and the editor who maybe says do XYZ, instead of going find a better. Oh no, you can't have a female, have a male. Whereas in Under the Mountain it's twins. So I don't know. See, in some ways I reflect on it and I go, Under the Mountain is almost what, if I think about it, it's a male and a female character, kind of like this. They're twins. They're both on a mission. It's more sci-fi because it's sort of an alien influence, but it's very quintessential New Zealand. It stays in New Zealand, but there's kind of an alien kind of. I'm not any spoilers, but basically there's a whole lot of volcanoes, archived volcanoes. That's not the word I'm looking for, but it'll do.
Dormant.
Thank you, dormant.
Yeah.
And the premise is that they're connected, and that there is alien creatures trying to prevent something from it all blowing up. So it's kind of cool. And I wonder if this was almost, I don't know where it came in his catalogue of works, and whether that came later on. So that's my only thought, was maybe this was early on in his career, but I don't think it is.
No, it's not. Under the Mountain was published before the Halfmen of O. So Under the Mountain was 1979, and the Halfmen of O is 1982.
I was just looking it up on Goodreads, and it has heaps of really good reviews. The Halfmen of O, I mean. And one of them, like, apparently it won a book of the New Zealand Children's Book of the Year.
We obviously had not many authors to choose from. I don't know.
But how long ago as well was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I almost
nearly.
want to go back and read a book from a similar period of time from my own history to sort of see how well it held up, to see whether this is just sort of it's a book it's a product of its time, and it would have and like us being this age, it would have a similar sort of effect on me. Or
the Changeover was only published 2 years later, so it was 1984.
Yes, but it's a YA.
Okay, yeah.
I was just looking at the top 2 reviews, and one of them's like, the pace and tone is dull and rhythmic, but this begins to suit the story. They gave it 4 stars, and someone else's, this wasn't fun to read aloud. The descriptions of landscapes seem to really drag on, go way over the Kit's head. Oh, that must be a kid. Gave it 4 stars though.
Yeah, but okay. She talks about how much she says, the kids seem to enjoy it, but I really hated reading it loud. I haven't told them there's 2 other sequels, and she gives it 4 stars. I'm like, lady, give it the 2 stars you've described. I think it's interesting, that nostalgia thing. I'll finish up with the nostalgia thing. This is kind of why I wanted to go there, because I've been thinking for ages, like, this is sci-fi. This is set where I grew up. It's a New Zealand author. What is it like? I don't remember anything except for the yin and yang and like the portal thing. And I know I forced everyone to read nostalgia from my childhood or from my youth before we read Matt Ruff's. I always call it The Wind Bearer, but that's not what it's called. Thorn on the Hill. Parts of it held up, parts of it didn't. And that's always kind of curious to me to see. Like The Never-Ending Story, the actual book. I love that book, and I read it a couple of times, but I'm also kind of worried about going back and rereading it. Would it hold up? So I don't know. Maybe I need to finish my nostalgia journey with this book club and stop dragging you into books of my past. So yeah. So let's talk about Margaret Mahy and the Changeover. So Kirsten and Matt didn't get to read it.
No.
I think the rest of us have.
Yes.
Mel, did you reread it, or your mind's pretty remembering it from last year pretty well, right?
Yeah,
I read it.
I read it. Sorry, let me check. I can actually tell you. I read it July last year, so almost a year ago.
Fresh.
Yeah, it's reasonably fresh. I've also got I've brought up all of the discussion thread for where we discussed it in the other book club, because it was an online discussion thread. So I've got my notes and stuff there, basically. I did ask. This. I did ask for the library copy, because I wanted to reread it, or at least scan it. But unfortunately, because the library closed, I never got a copy.
Yeah.
And I wasn't willing to buy it when I'd already read it. So
yeah. Boo, ISO.
Exactly. Do you want to do like a synopsis for Kirsten and Matt before we get going?
Yeah, sure. I'm just wondering what Matt's drinking. Pink with green.
Raspberry and mint kettle sour.
Oh,
Ooh.
sour. I can't drink sour.
I love sours.
The only kind of beer I can drink.
Yeah, actually, how much? I was going to say, if you've had
Be right back.
no wine, I would bring
Look
this
at my
up.
teeth. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I've got another can of it, so next time I open one, you can have some. Sorry, back to
I've
the
been
book.
drinking Cab Sav, and it's
Yeah.
purple.
It's Elizabeth is like talking
Okay, they're talking about.
I'm out of here.
Would it have been different if we'd talked about tea, though?
Yeah. Well, I make Earl Grey tea martinis. They're pretty good.
Oh yeah.
Blending.
What are we talking about? The Changeover, Margaret Mahy. So Mel, recommended this book, and thank God she did. So this was, I also kind of raced through this myself because one, I just needed to, you know, get it done, and actually it moved pretty quickly. Right from the get-go, when I started this book, it was just like a breath of fresh air after reading the first one. If I go back to, I think I can go back to, yeah, don't go back to the beginning. Oh, and someone's written this massive intro. Yeah, so the first thing that opens with this, you know, although the label on the hair shampoo said Paris and had a picture of the beautiful girl with the Eiffel Tower behind her bare shoulder, it was forced to tell the truth in tiny print under the picture. Made in New Zealand, it said. Wisdom Laboratories, para umu. And that, like, you want to, like, that was that's how I felt my entire childhood, was like wishing I was somewhere else other than little New Zealand where nothing ever happened. And B, I'm like, holy shit, like, I know where para umu is, and I just, you know, like, you know, hey, wow, a place I know.
Hit with those feels.
Yeah, and it's just the way that it wrote that, I was like, oh, I'm already feeling this character. The other thing that I liked, so there's so much I want to talk about what I liked about this. I had problems, not that I thought the writing was bad, but there was just problematic things now that I like think about. So I guess I just want to maybe I should just get that out of the way. So one of the things I find problematic is, so I understand what they were talking about from fourth form and form 7, because that's what I had when I grew up, right? So form 7 is what I think year 12 here. Is that right? What you call year 12? And then I think, and then what form 4 is, I think what you call year 8. So
something like that.
Yeah. And yeah, I just, you know, there was just a lot of that. And so that was kind of my main issue, was, although 4 years is not a lot between adults, it's a lot between that age group and really right up until people are like 18, 22, 20, 24. Yeah. 22, 20, like, you know, even I kind of, there was some things in there, and there was some power plays I didn't like particularly. But I thought she dealt with them well. Look, I want to hear from other people, because I've spoken too much.
No, I agree with you on that side of things. I thought the relationship aspect was was truly the icky part of the story. It felt uncomfortable, especially as an adult reading it. But I think as a young adult reading it, you wouldn't have been bothered by it. And I felt like you said, I felt like it was dealt with okay at the end. Like by the end of it, I was okay with it. During it, I was a bit like, as a person who's taught high school, I'm very uncomfortable with this relationship right now. The age disparity. But as an adult, I'm mostly thinking about it in terms of what's this going to be like in a year or two, when he's a legal adult and she's still in high school, and just like, but yeah, I felt like she dealt with it okay in the end. And then I also reminded myself that we are more sensitive to these things than we used to be.
Yeah, and I think part of why I'm sensitive to it is that, when you're 14, 15, 16 and older guys, it's like, oh, it's so romantic and all that kind of stuff. But what it actually is, a power, you know, when you're older, you go, no, that's a power disparity.
Exactly.
And what I don't like is that writing this makes it seem like it's okay to young girls, and that's what I don't like seeing, because it just I don't like that romantic, like I don't like seeing it romanticized for, you know, because it's easy enough for girls as it is to feel like, oh, you know, but you know, to look up and think it's all right, as opposed to not realizing from the outside perspective actually it's not. Anyway, I think this makes sense to Mel understands what I'm talking about, and I just I felt weird about.
But otherwise, I felt like it was a fantastic story.
Yeah.
That was like my
And
only real complaint.
and where, so I suppose I'm supposed to give them a synopsis. Kim, why don't you do this bit?
Don't leave it to me. I'm tired. Oh, what did it first remind me of? It sort of felt a little Goosebumps, like a horror story-esque in the little shop at first. Like I was reading something from Goosebumps. After I'd read it today, I was thinking about
Uh-oh.
Oh,
how.
we'll never know. We'll never know.
You froze F, Kim.
Oh, sorry. Yep, I see the big message on my screen. My internet connection is unstable. I did think later of some that there seemed to be some similarities, not a lot, not lots, but a lot of similarities between Sorry and How.
Yes, I totally got that too.
Yeah.
Oh, right, from Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially the book.
Totally.
I would
Yeah,
say
you know,
the
when
book.
we read the book in book club,
Yep.
and yeah, I'm totally seeing what you're talking about.
Yes, that especially the whole emotional level, whereas Sorry was sort of coming from the furthest point away from having human emotions to sort of coming back. How sort of in their story sort of gets further away and then comes back. So I saw that sort of emotional struggle about not wanting to care and then starting to care was quite similar. I can't think what else there was more than one point that I thought they were very similar on, but I can't recall at the moment.
I thought so here's what I found the character development, like I believe the characters, they were very three-dimensional. I understood what their motivations were. I understood what was driving them, where, you know, it was just this really good bit, especially around the relationships, like using those relationships to learn more about each character was really good, like understanding more about her and her relationship with Kate through the new boyfriend and how like that really was disrupting her world and her worldview, but more to do with what her father had left behind, and that was really interesting. I thought Margaret Mahy did that really well actually, and I was so curious about these other relationships and thinking, is this an 80s thing, you know, where, you know, men would walk out or get thrown out or, you know, didn't feel they could have contact. Like I was very curious about what Sorry's background was, what Laura's relationship and Jacko's relationship with her father was, whether they even had the same father. And I liked how she slowly drip fed us that, which is part of the character development through the plot and raising the stakes. And I thought that was done really beautifully. And to the point that I was very, you know, upset, and also explained so much about why Sorensen was the way he was when he was explaining basically the abusive relationship of his father. And then he did touch upon his mother at the end and how he was reading, like, and it just sounds like, you know, she just wasn't there for him, and just like, you know, he was reading romance novels as a way to get close to her because he never could. And it was just, and that whole thing was heartbreaking. It really was.
Yeah.
And I totally understand. Like, I'm like going, wow, you know, this author knows her stuff. She's researched that people of abuse, like they find other ways of coping, that they put up shells and they put up walls, and yeah, wow, she's nailed this. And they don't necessarily know how to interact with people because they've never been shown good models of it. And it was just, I was like, wow, this reads so true. And actually, in so many ways, this is good for young people to read because it will help them be a little bit more empathetic to people as they get older, or they're acting weird. It may be there's something else at play there. So I thought that was really cool. The scene with, is it Carmody Brack? Carmody Brack? Yeah, that's right. Even though I didn't hate the novel, I just got annoyed with it. You know, the novel that tried to be that said it was the Night Circus, but it wasn't, and I don't even remember the name of
Yeah.
it. because
Carnival.
Yes. There was something about that whole scene in the sweet shop that reminded me of when the protagonist in Caraval enters that first shop with the clockworks at the beginning and they're testing her. Did anyone else get kind of that feel from it? Like nobody's to be trusted in that world of Caraval, and that was that scene of like knowing you're walking into doom. Did anyone get that? I got shades of that.
It felt all sense of wrong.
Yeah, as soon as she walked in there, it's just like warning signs that she'd already had warning signs, but it was like red lights going off.
This is the moment you've had the warning about. That's what happened at that stage. You were like, this is it. This is what you got your feelings about. This is what's wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Which
and
she
then the
even
scene,
could see herself.
and
Like,
she just couldn't. Yeah, and she was sort of being charmed and what's the word I'm looking for? Bewitched. Yeah.
it reminded me a little bit of a story that Mel and I recently read, actually, but that's by the by, about like kind of like not being able to change the future. That kind of inevitability to it.
Yes, that moment.
It wasn't the time traveler's wife, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was a story from the new Ted Chiang anthology collection. Sorry, the very first story.
Melancholy is the time traveler's wife.
It just plays with
It's pretty melancholic.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, like if you subscribe to the theory that time travel cannot allow you to actually change the future and all the past and things like that, it is kind of a melancholy idea because,
I just because I read that Time Traveler's Wife and it's the most melancholy I've ever felt in my life. Just such a hopeless novel. Yeah, it's good. It's just hopeless. Don't come out of it expecting, fun things.
I loved that book, but I also bawled my eyes out.
Yeah, well, that was me, and I was sick as a dog reading it, and so it was middle of winter, balled up in bed reading this book, and I was just in mess.
And I read it before I had kids. I don't think I could handle it now. Yeah.
Oh,
anyway,
sidetrack.
My point was that it just had a bit of that feeling of inevitability, that she knows that this is but she, like, it's just out of her control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was definitely what she was trying to say about all of that. Like having a warning that something might be coming isn't the same as knowing and being able to actually change it. So, and one of the things I did like about the story in particular, and I remember this very distinctly, was the fact that the brothers still remained very central to the plot, despite the fact that there was a romance storyline. Like that she didn't allow her main character to get swept away on that side of things. It continued to be about her wanting to rescue her brother. And that was just sort of a side element to it all.
The relationship with her brother is ascendant over her relationship with Sari.
Do you guys think that it needed to have a romance?
I don't think it needed to. No.
I don't think it needed to, but I think it was inevitable given, like, whether it was a good romance or whether it was a successful long-term romance, are two different things. It's a different thing, but I think it was inevitable given her age and who he was in the situation. Like, I think for him to be there and for his character to be part of it, to create the connection to what became her avenue to be able to get in to save her brother, for him, he was going to be someone who she was going to be interested in because of her age.
Sorry, Kiki's just biting her brother.
Getting her own back.
What did you guys think of the romance that Kate had? I'll be honest, I thought that Chris was going to turn out to be bad. I was waiting for what do you call it?
The flip.
twist.
Yeah, the surprise. What do you call it? The
The
twist.
reveal, the twist.
The
yeah.
reveal.
I
was
thought
waiting
it
for
was
to turn out to be
possible,
comedy.
but I
Yeah.
didn't want it to happen because that would have been really predictable. So I'm glad it didn't, because I would have gone, ugh.
I thought that was actually a really real moment, actually. For her age, her mother having a relationship with someone new. She's, you know, some kids are really good with that sort of thing, but I'm not surprised she was suspicious and had those feelings. And so I felt like that was good, that it was treated well.
I felt that she had the emotions and emotions of the characters, and their drive was down really well. It was really realistic to me. Everyone's motivation and what they did and the way they acted. Yeah, nothing really stood out to me as going, oh no, they would never do that. Oh, that person's so stupid. A real person would never do that.
The
Everything
only bit that I was a little
Yeah.
bit about though was Kate's reaction when Jacko was first sick and she was trying to still go out with Chris, and I'm like, what are you doing, woman? Cancel your fucking date.
Yeah, that was really weird. But then she got to the door and she's like,
And then
"Hello."
she got the guilt
Yeah.
about it, and then he was guilt tripping her, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, I was like, that was my suspicion. I was like, going, is he going to turn out to be comedy, like, or some other kind of evil guy, because he's acting like he needs to get her out of the house, like maybe so that someone can get to Laura.
Yeah, Laura talks to him and he's like, oh, probably because I got defensive because I thought about my ex-wife and how she stood me up, and maybe maybe it's me and this is happening all over again. You're like, oh, now I understand. He's like, was I being a dick? Well, he didn't say that really. He's like, was I being a dick? And she's like, you were kind of being a dick.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, I won't be a dick anymore.
Yeah, that was the only bit that I was just thinking, that because that's what made me so suspicious, was that bit where I was going, why is she not staying home with her sick child? Why is she like wanting to go out with a guy more? Like, I get it in some ways, but at the same time, your son's really sick and your kid's she's only 14. So I was like,
she puts a lot on Laura. And plus it was a very fast relationship.
Yes.
I think that's the other element that makes you suspicious, is because it is so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas at least with Sorry, even though they haven't interacted much, they've still been at school together, and there's that kind of that seeing of each other and knowing like who they are. Yeah.
They've had a crush on each other without realizing they had a crush on each other. You know, it was totally long looks across the quad type stuff.
Which, I mean, it's still like, I just don't see an 18-year-old doing that with a 14-year-old.
Yeah, it's not good. Like, you should be thinking about university, dude. And
but at least he gets that in the end. Like, he comes to that realization himself.
Yeah.
I know. Which is why I'm like, at the end, it's okay. But I spent the whole book very cranky about it. So I do remember that part.
I can remember when I was in year 10, one of the girls in our friend group started going out with one of the boys in grade 8, and we all thought she was a freak. Like, I remember we were all like, why would you go out with a boy in grade 8? That's just weird. That's just... Because at that age and age difference is
17 and
huge.
We would have been,
right?
grade 8 would have been, grade 8 is 13 turning 14, I think, and grade 10 would have been 15, 16.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were like, why would you do that?
And
Like,
those 2
it
years
seemed like such a
girls,
big gap.
That's such, what's the word I'm looking for? Puberty times are those years, those 13, 14, you know. Like, well, that's what she writes about in the book, about like so much is it written in is this puberty stuff that she's like the character's going through.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing with the coven is the whole what do you call it? The
Mother Crone.
Thank you.
The Trinity,
What? Yeah, the
Maiden Mother Crone.
Right, sorry, I missed that.
Oh, I totally missed that. Like, she replaced Sorry in some way as the maiden,
which I also kind of felt a bit icky about.
But I
didn't even think of it right till now.
That was one of the things that I kind of like, as much as there was other elements that I didn't like, especially around the relationship. That part I forgave before because it was of its time. I was like, they're doing a lot that's actually really good around females and female strength and positivity and stuff. I'm going to forgive them for the fact that the gender equality thing was really kind of bullshit in reverse.
Yeah.
It really was.
It really was stupid.
And I missed that because what I took away was that what Winter, or was it Winter?
Winter was the crone.
Wanted, what she was hoping to get out of it. I didn't think it was that she wanted the maiden. I thought she wanted the influence on, like, she wanted, if Sorrison went through it, that he would derive more humanity from her. Like, that was what she wanted from the whole thing. So I missed that altogether.
I feel like that was part of what they were hoping for.
I think that was part of it as well.
And I think one of the reasons why they weren't willing to have Sorry in the maiden role was because they didn't trust him to not turn to the bad. Because I could be remembering this part wrong because it was not a major plot point as far as I remember, but there was a concern that he would not stay the good path, and so I feel like they didn't completely trust him to take on that maiden role because of that reason as well. But that was tied in with him being male as well. So
I think that it was also, though, when I read between the lines of that, maybe this is my own projection, that part of the reason that he had that is because, and they had Winter and Mariam have to take responsibility for it. Part of it is because they fostered him out into a situation, and yet they still, like, they demanded something from the foster parents, and that he ended up in a really bad situation where he was abused, and yet he comes back and he's been punished for the fact that
it sucks.
The abusers turned him into who he is, and yet he's been punished for it. And that's part of what I was also really annoyed at, is like, you know, it's kind of like, you're not accepting him in, but also by not accepting him in, you're just continuing this circle of
you're making it worse.
Yeah, and you have to start somewhere. So
you can't blame him for his behaviour when it's yours that made it so.
And when he came back in, you could have been more to him, and you still held him at arm's length. So it was which I could tell that's why he didn't let them in, is because, well, you didn't welcome me back in. You just, so I can't trust you because you weren't the family I came looking for. Anyway, that might be me projecting onto it, but that's what I kind of got from the subtext.
No, I agree with all of that. Like, I feel like that's all in place as well. It's all a bit of a difficult situation. Like, there's no real easy solution to what they're talking about in terms of the power outside of things. But
that is
by the
also
same
what is
token,
great about the book.
Sorry?
I said, but that complexity is also what's great about the book.
And actually, just reflecting on that, the adults in this book are complex and fuck up and are human, and that's part of what the teenagers have to come to realize, is just because they are adults doesn't mean that they have everything together, and they're not going to do wrong by you and fuck shit up. And that's part of being an adult. So I think that's really like, that's what they come to realize, is that you have to give them a break. You know, your parents, they're not perfect. And, you know, even though they should be the ones, the bigger people in the room, maybe you're going to have to be that. Like,
and I liked the fact that the adults were very much part of the solution in some respects too, even though her mum sort of was ignoring her warnings and stuff in the beginning. She did seek adult help to solve the problem, not just we teenagers are going to take care of this sort of thing. So while she had to solve the problem herself, it was through help from adults that she was able to do so. Okay, going to my notes now. I may not have anything else. I'm just like, what else is there?
The language was quite lovely. It was
really great,
lovely turns of phrase, and And as you read the beginning, Sarah, it was just very lovely. Some great imagery and nice language. Very well written.
I have some highlights. Oh yeah, this was nice. So there's a couple of nostalgia moments, but this is the bit that I also went, oh man, more like kind of like it was like a circle of understanding about Sorry, and then this is the bit that got me at the end, and even reading it now that I've had a Negroni is catching me up. So it says here, but Sorry turned on her abruptly. "Shut up, will you?" he exclaimed. "I say stupid things at times. Don't bother remembering them. It's just that tears are catching." So he's told her to stop crying.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, dude, you're speaking my language. It's exactly so, yeah, I like, and that's, you know, like that's, I thought, oh, there's humanity there. That's the thing. And I had a couple of other things that I think others who are of my time will remember. Well, you guys won't remember this, but actually, Elizabeth and Mel might have this. Maybe not Elizabeth, Mel might. So I did history in high school, and he talks about the exams for me as doing bursary exams, which is what it was in my day, and end of school. He talks about, I'm deep into parliamentary development under the Stuarts. I'm like, oh God, I remember that was awful. I just have like memories of doing history about England. I'm like, it'd be good to learn about New Zealand history.
That'd be good.
That'd be good. Like the same thing here in Australia. It'd be good to learn about Australian history.
History was one class I could never zone out in because they used the name Elizabeth too many times. Could never be sure whether they're talking about me or about a queen.
Indeed. And then I like this bit because I think we should all have this memory. So Chris was pouring what wine was left into long glasses which had once held peanut butter.
Ours used to be jam jars, class jam jars.
And like there's other people had memories of this where you get them and then you wash them out and you have a whole of I was like,
we had them
those
too,
are the
jam
days.
Jam jars,
yeah. And that's also a great turn of phrase, like left into long glasses, which had once had, like she's got a good way of with words.
And if you use
Good eye for
those jars,
detail.
like you know exactly what they look like that description pins it perfectly.
Yeah. And I thought there were some interesting things as well that I feel like we were the right age to look back on this, but I'm not sure if young adults today, even though there's a lot of complexity, I think they'd get very confused by the phone situation.
People used to not have phones. You had to pay fees to use the phone.
And that the phone itself belonged to you didn't own the phone, you rented the phone, so that if you didn't use the phone or pay for the phone, they came and took the phone away and put it in. So I was just like, oh wow, like I remember all this, and I remember party lines, I remember all kinds of stuff. Like that's why I always got that Rock Hudson, what's her name? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
We just stumped as you are.
Doris Day, Rock Hudson film.
Oh.
Party line.
Yeah.
Because there we go. People wouldn't get that because they didn't know what party lines were. We're like, why are they on each other's phone? Anyway.
Hell, I felt like we had that problem when we were reading Connie Willis's books.
I was just going to bring that up, Mel, when I was like, this is set in the future, but nobody has a mobile phone and everyone keeps missing calls from each other because they have the landlines.
They don't even have proper messaging systems. I'm sorry, answering machine systems.
God, when I was in primary school, I was like drawing little drawings of things which are basically smartphones today. The smartphones are even better than what I was drawing.
Look, to be fair, I don't even feel like a lot of these stories have any excuse. Star Trek existed when these stories were on. They had little communicators, which were essentially like a mobile phone today. They've just not envisioned this idea when they've done them. But anyway.
That whole book could not have worked if mobile phones. How many plot things happened in that book because somebody was out of their house when someone else tried to ring them about something important And if they hadn't been able to call them on their mobile and tell them that important thing, then the whole mood that was like, oh, we solved the problem of the book, and now there's no story left.
So for anybody who
to
doesn't
say
know,
nothing of the dog?
This is Doomsday Book
it's Doomsday Book.
And To Say Nothing of the Dog. Mostly Doomsday Book though, because
Okay.
that's the one that's truly set in that modern setting.
Do you guys know Nerdwriter on YouTube? Have you ever watched any of his video essays? They're really good for starters.
I feel like I might have watched a few, but I don't know him that well.
Yeah, he's really good. He did one, which I'll pop up in chat now. It's called Why Are There So Few Smartphones in Popular Movies, Including All Age? It's because it solves plot points.
Yes.
That's what you said. Like even in movies, if you have mobile phones, you can solve things. So often they'll figure out ways to make their no network, and someone loses their phone or runs out of battery because you can solve problems.
Not to mention, it also really dates the movie. So, like, I remember rewatching the remake of Serena with Harrison Ford and Juliette Ormond, I think.
Yeah.
And like his laptop computer thing is monstrosity. Like,
and it's supposed to look like it's like the latest tech because he's super rich, right?
Yeah.
No, I agree, and I think that's one of the things that I like about this book is the nostalgia value for it. But yes, I agree that it would be difficult for kids today because, like, you watch those like kids react shows where the kids are given like an old school phone and expected to, how do you make a phone call, and they're like, I don't know what to do with the rotary dial.
There's always one or two that work it out though.
But like it just. I think in the end that they wouldn't know how to figure it out, sort of thing, like to understand the world and why this is a problem, kind of thing, when they're so used to mobile phones. So
I just thought that was interesting in this book because it's so particular the problems that they have, like the car not starting is one thing and needing to replace a battery, like that I'm pretty sure cars still work that way, where you can jumpstart them by rolling them down a hill.
The old ones at least.
I'm sure that's still accurate.
I was just going to say, newer ones with computers, I think you have issues when you're jump starting them. I've been told you shouldn't jumpstart cars that have computers in them, like newer cars, because it'll fry all your electronics.
You need to know what you're doing with those ones.
Yeah. And I can't do that with my car anyway because I have no ignition. I have a button, so it's all, but I have memories of that. Also, I'm from Wellington, so we have plenty of hills that we used to do shit on. But there's the whole thing about the phones and having to use someone else's phone or going to use the pay phone. Yeah, there's memories of this. Oh, this book also reminded me of you, Kim. Do you know which bit? I got like, this reminds me of somebody else.
No.
The whole getting a promotion but not getting the raise to go with it.
Oh, yep. Actually, I read that. I'm like, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, getting angry on behalf of somebody else again. I go in the middle there.
Sarah, I just wanted to ask a question. What was the Vespa situation like back in New Zealand?
What was that a question for me? Or?
Yeah. What was the Vespa situation like?
Vespa.
Was that a thing much?
Not really.
Okay.
I was a bit confused by that. Most people, if they would have bikes, but they wouldn't have Vespas. You would have Nifty 50s. Nifty 50s were the big thing back, like Hondas. Hondas were the big. Vespas were, and I'm pretty sure still are, expensive because they're Italian. So.
Well, that's why I thought he had a Vespa because they were rich.
Yeah, okay, that makes more sense.
That was a novelty to have a Vespa.
Yeah, whereas, most people who'd have a scooter, it's because it's a reasonably priced piece of transport that got you from A to B on the smell of an oily rag, but Vespas, don't get me wrong, Vespas are cool, but I don't they didn't protect you from the wind and the rain and
very big deal in New Zealand.
To look good. Well, not even good.
Although his Vespa probably wasn't that expensive because he was constantly fixing it, so maybe probably a second-hand Vespa.
Maybe it was a vintage one that he was trying to, learn how to fix. I don't know. I just got the feeling that she was going for kind of a James Dean thing. That's all I see.
Discount James Dean.
What was it, Elizabeth?
I said, really? James Dean in a Vespa?
People are like the rebel without a call. Yeah, like, yeah.
I get it. It's just, I'm from a motorbike family, so scooters get ragged on a lot.
Yeah, but I feel like I agree though. I feel like it's the way you sort of try to give that feeling when you're not really giving that feeling to a teenager, especially. Like,
For sure.
Oh yeah, and on the note of starting a car by rolling it down a hill, our driveway's like that at home. I'm sure my dad did that a million times with all the cars we had. All the junk boxes that he had to get started, roll it down the hill to start it in.
I had a friend whose car used to do that when it was her first car when she was like, 19, 18, 19. And she used to work at the fruit shop up the road from where I used to live. And her car, it was something wrong. It was either the starter or the battery or something that was wrong with it. She used to have to get her boss to give her a push start on the way home every day because the car was such a piece of shit. Every day she used to have to get a push start on. Like she'd drive it to like. Oh, this was late 90s. This would have been 98, 99.
Right.
But it was like a cheap $300 car or something that she'd got when she was first graduated high
I'm
school.
actually just reflecting, and I'm wondering if Margaret Mahy doesn't know much about cars, because the problem she's actually having isn't necessarily the battery. It either is the battery isn't holding charge or her spark plugs aren't working. So I'm like, it could be either. One is expensive and one's kind of cheap.
On the other hand, the character didn't seem like she had a whole lot of car expertise, so...
True.
I was
expensive.
assuming from bits and pieces that like someone had looked at it and told her she needs to replace the
You need
battery,
another,
and then she's like, yeah, I can't afford that. So she knew specifically what it was, just couldn't afford to have anything done.
So, guys, I don't know if anybody knew this, but a movie was made out of this book.
Oh,
Really?
Oh.
I think that, and people said this was better than the movie.
Yeah, the movie's not good. In fact, they kind of make it into much more of a horror story, I believe. And it was only really released in New Zealand, but I've put a link in the chat to the trailer if you want to watch it.
Which chat? Our chat? Okay, cool.
Our chat,
The
our
one,
local
this
chat.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
The
chat.
Zoom chat, yeah.
see
Zoom
why
chat
they
doesn't make clickable links.
would
How annoying.
emphasize like a horror angle, because I mean,
It's pretty horrifying.
yeah, it is pretty horrifying.
Well, horror, not YA feel, basically. Like they took away the YA element feel of it. At least that's what I got from it. But you got to remember, guys, I'm much more sensitive to horror than most too. So
Yeah, but it's...
No, I'm with you on that, Mel.
It's definitely horrifying though, like that. But I was going to say that bit where she says she comes into the room and Jacko wakes up and has Carmody Barak's smile on his face. Like that was written really well, and I was just like, that was very upsetting.
yeah.
And yeah, very, very well written. And she like, I think we just talked about this before, how she will build using all the senses, and that the description the whole time of that rotten peppermint smell was really good, really effective.
Yes, made my peppermint tea this afternoon a little bit odd.
I love peppermint, so it's like, okay, I have to imagine something like with a smell of socks underneath it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really well done.
Probably could have recreated it at work. Just go sit in one of the rooms, peppermint tea with a smell of feet.
I'm just looking at this. Who's she got on this? Timothy Spall, Lucy Lawless, Melanie Linsky.
Star-studded.
Well,
That was
but I'm also
going for a good
going,
release.
Who's playing the mum? Is it Lucy Lawless or Melanie Linsky? Because according to the...
Lucy Lawless could be Sorry's mum.
Yeah, good point. Or Mrs. Fangbanger. Great name.
Yeah, Fangbanger was older, wasn't she?
I don't know, but I just like that name's awesome.
Did they lift it? No, it would have been predated True Blood.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, did other people think of that too? Because I was like, when they said it sounds like this, I'm like, does it now? I was like, sure it does.
Yeah, the other thing I've popped, it's not a link, unfortunately, but the description. The other thing I posted in the chat, this is actually how I found out about this book in the first place, was episode 4 of the Red Pen podcast, where one of the hosts actually just goes to town on loving sorry, because to her, sorry was her how. But it's a really good little discussion about the book if you want to listen to a discussion about it, because that's how I found out about it and went, I want to read that. And then the Lady Volts book club was like, we're looking for authors that aren't American and white and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'd already done an Australian author for them, so I found a New Zealand one for them, and this was the one I suggested. So
good job, Mel. Was there anything in your notes that is worth us chatting?
No, I mean, it was just a general consensus of what we've talked about, which was, concerns around the age for the romance, and yeah, everything else was really good. A lot of people like the family aspects. A lot of people confused about how old she was because they were concerned. And because obviously less people sort of understood the form thing, because a lot of Americans and stuff in the group.
New Zealand doesn't have forms anymore, so
yeah, that too.
So Lucy Lawless is Miriam. Sorry's mum.
Okay,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I
think that's pretty much it. I think Books and Pieces, who's the YouTuber who runs the Lady Volts Club thing, I think she did a very good video on it discussing it as well. She goes into a bit of detail, but I failed to rewatch that. I forgot about it until right before the hangout. Went, I should have rewatched that. But anyway.
Oh, cool. Okay, so Melanie Linsky is playing Kate, because I was thinking she'd be a good age for that. Timothy Spall as Carmody Brack, he's a good choice because he's a bit of a chameleon. Like if you think about it, he was the rat, he was
Peter Pettigrew.
Yeah,
yes.
He's the Pettigrew, yeah. He's got a very who's the other great Jim Broadbent, he's the other one person who's always able to be a bit of a chameleon, like never looks the same in any role.
Yeah.
Pretty good. James and Kate Harcourt as Winter Carlisle. That's pretty cool. I wonder why they couldn't get Miranda Harcourt to play that, because then you have both an actual mother and daughter team playing mother and daughter. That'd be cool.
Maybe it was an age problem.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know them well enough to talk to that. I just was like, if they weren't the right ages.
Why do I know Claire? Oh, Jackie's sister. Okay, cool. Sorry. Sorry, New Zealanders, we all know one another. I was like, why do I know Claire? Oh, I don't. I know her sister.
So what you're saying is the 6 degrees of separation is a lot shorter in New Zealand.
2
degrees, right?
2. Yes, very much so.
Shall we wrap up then?
Yeah,
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job there.
Excellent.
Right.
Cool. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. So, takeaways: don't read the Halfmen of O, but Changeover what worth your time.
There you go.
Kim, did you want to introduce the book for next month?
Oh yeah. We're watching reading space opera next month. So if anybody wants
my
to,
pick.
that's
When
right.
I get the book, hopefully
Yep.
soon. Order at the
Fingers
same time
crossed.
as these, so hopefully it'll be here in a few days.
It's
There
on
you go.
Audible, right? I can use a credit because I've got a couple of them floating around. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
It is on Audible. I listened to it. I think it was the first book I listened to this year, actually, on Audible.
Oh.
In case you didn't catch that, that is Space Opera by Kat Valente.
Thank you. All right, guys, I'm ending the recording. Thank you, anybody who joined us and hang out the whole time. Well done. I'm impressed. And we'll see you next time. Bye.